Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for The Big Story. I'm Adrienne LaFrance. I'm the Atlantic's executive editor, and I am thrilled to be joined today by the one and only Arthur C. Brooks, a happiness columnist here at The Atlantic and the author of The Happiness Files, which I have my prop here. I'll hold it up. Here. And I'm not hearing Arthur. I'm wondering if I'm frozen. Arthur, can you hear me?
Hey, you were frozen there for a minute. Am I frozen for you too? Sorry about these technical problems.
No, I think we're good now. Thank you. And yeah, the age of computers. So first of all, congrats on the book. And I think we'll start, I'll pepper you with some questions about the book, about happiness and work and life generally. And we have quite a few questions from Atlantic subscribers. So pleased that they are joining us today as well. So we'll do that. But to start, I love, just because some of our readers may not know your background, what is it that got you into happiness research, and what sort of brought you into this world of happiness in the first place?
Well, it was you and Jeff Goldberg, actually, but that probably is in the middle of the story. I'm a behavioral scientist by background. After a pretty long career as a classical musician all the way through my 20s, I actually went to college late, finished my college degree at 30, and then went on to do my PhD and became a social scientist. And I taught for about 10 years, most of it at Syracuse, and I was very interested in charity and beauty and all these sort of weird behavioral things. And I found the taproot behind both of these things is happiness. And then in the middle of starting to explore this, I went away and ran a think tank in Washington, D.C. For 10 years, for 10 and a half years. I was president of a think tank, and I was very unhappy, among other things, because doing public policy in Washington, D.C. is like mano a mano all the time. I mean, it was a great organization, but still, I mean, how are you going to be happy? And so I thought to myself when I left that, I was 55 years old, and what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I was having this kind of midlife experience. And I went and I walked the Camino de Santiago, which is this 800-kilometer walk across northern Spain. I didn't do the whole thing. I did most of it, did a lot of it. And I was praying the whole time, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? And I felt that I was given this information to go back to my roots and to spend the rest of my life as a behavioral scientist, lifting people up and bringing them together in bonds of happiness and love using science and ideas. And so that's what I did. I took a job teaching happiness at Harvard. And about a year in, I had this very, very popular class called Leadership and Happiness, the most popular elective at the Harvard Business School. And my old buddy, Jeff Goldberg, came to me and said, why don't you turn something like this class into a column at The Atlantic? Because as everybody knows, it's the only idea magazine that matters in the whole world anymore. I said, yes, I'm aware, Jeff, I'm aware. And we did it. And that's been 5 years that we've been 5 years, Adrienne. Can you believe it?
Love about your work is you draw often on the wisdom of the ancients. You're often looking back for sort of thoughts and philosophies on how to live happily today. And I'm curious to hear you talk about that generally, but also more specifically, how do you think our concept, our sort of human, our species concept of happiness has changed culturally, personally? Like, how has happiness changed over the centuries, and what does that tell us about where we are today?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And for the longest time, of course, before the age of behavioral science and before the age of how we can analyze data, it was really only for philosophers to talk about what a flourishing and a good life well lived was all about. And so happiness 1.0 was sort of Aristotle. That's how you'd think about it. People who would be hypothesizing about what eudaimonia, the good life well lived. And by the way, that stuff was incredible. The second era of this beyond philosophy was getting into the 19th century, which we think of as the psychoanalytic era, where people were trying to figure out if there was a way that they could be less unhappy than they currently were, or whether unhappiness was the nature of the human condition. And what we've done over the last 30 years in science, in both neuroscience and behavioral science, is tie those two things together and then bring in the newest of technology, the newest of what we know in terms of statistics and experimental techniques, and that's happiness 3.0. So people who read my column in The Atlantic, they know that I cover 10 or 15 big studies every week, but in a way that human beings can read them. And it's neuroscience, behavioral science, philosophy, psychoanalysis, spiritual traditions, all in one pot, stir, serve. That's kind of how it works out. So it's I'm hoping that what we're doing today is the best of everything over the past, I don't know, just maybe 2,000 or 3,000 years, just that.
Easy. One thing I always enjoy talking to you about is this question of sort of like, it's a little bit of a nature versus nurture question, but just this idea that some people are born dispositionally happier. And especially given all of your deep knowledge of the research into this, like what should we do with that? Like if you're a person who is just sort of sunny by disposition or gloomy by disposition, how should we take the fact that not everyone has the same baseline and apply it to the way we act in our own lives or in our relationships or in guiding our children or, however you might think about that?
Yeah, about half of your baseline happiness is genetic. It's and we know this from identical twins that were separated at birth and given personality tests at 40. So a lot of their personality is between 40 and 80% of every personality characteristic is genetic, and about half of your happiness. So Adrienne, it's literally true that your mother made you unhappy. Sorry. So or happy. I know you are. I know you actually are. But me, on the other hand, it would seem, if we're really deterministic about it, that I'm doomed. I mean, I have super gloomy parents. I mean, it was a mess. And the reason I'm so interested in happiness because I want it. It's me search more than research, right? But here's the good news. It's only half. And that means that the other half that's at your disposal, about half of the half, 25% is circumstantial, which, by the way, doesn't last. We always think that if good things happen, we'll be happy forever. Get the house, get the car, get the marriage. No, like a week. But we also think that bad things will make us unhappy forever. Also not true. But the other quarter is really under our control. Habits will give us direct managerial control over a quarter of our happiness, plus give us systematically better circumstances, and most importantly, allow us to manage our genetics. So here's the thing. Everybody watching me who is genetically gloomy, don't blame your parents. Don't worry about it. Get good habits. Read How to Build a Life or the Happiness File, whatever. Read the stuff. Learn. Change your habits, and what that will do is that will completely change everything, because what matters is habits. It doesn't matter that all half of gloomy. That means you have to work harder. It's the same thing, by the way. Half of your tendency toward alcoholism is also genetic, but you can change your habits to zero by not drinking. And so the same thing is basically happiness. And this, by the way, has been the game changer for me. Since I've been writing How to Build a Life in the Atlantic, my happiness has gone up by 60%. And I know this because I have the best, most cutting edge techniques for measuring that. And I make my students take the test, so I take them myself.
Well, I want to go back to habits, but first, say more about that. How do you measure your own happiness?
The way that you do that, you have to be committed to actually not lying. So, for example, when I'm testing large groups of people, I don't ask people in front of their spouse, how happy are you? Because they'll lie for sure, right? So you have to get people in a state where they're not especially bummed out or especially ebullient for some reason. And then you ask them to compare themselves, all things considered at this point in their life, to the people that they've met, where a number 10 is the happiest person they've ever met, and a number 1 is the unhappiest person. And they try to put faces to that. And then they say, all things considered at this point in your life, what's your number? And then you get a large enough sample, you can get very, very accurate and incredibly stable data. This has been tested again and again. And if you take it with honesty and sincerity yourself, you can actually see your own changes over time. And I've seen my happiness go up and up and up and up and up, which is great because, when I was in my mid 50s, it wasn't great. It wasn't very good at all. And now I'm 61 years old and I'm fundamentally happier. Part of it is because I get to write about happiness. And that's another part of the secret. So learn about happiness, change your habits, and teach others. That turns out to be the 1, 2, 3 approach for everybody watching us to become a happiness teacher in their own life and benefit as a result.
Let's talk about some of those habits. I mean, things come to mind like making sure you get regular exercise, make sure you're spending face time with other people. When you're thinking about the habits that lead to greater happiness, what comes first to mind for you, or what does the research show?
So the research shows that there's a lot of different things that you can do, but there's only 4 things that really, really bring up happiness a lot. And there's a lot of things that you can do to bring unhappiness down. So you mentioned exercise. I'm a super gym rat, and I have been for decade after decade. It's all self-defense against my negative disposition. against my negative affect. And I have an article coming up in my column in about 4 weeks. That is my morning protocol to lower my negative affect. And it talks scientifically about the steps that will actually change your brain processes that lower your level of negative emotionality. So people who are reading the column, they'll see that with all the links, and they can mimic that if they want. And part of that I actually learned from the Dalai Lama, with whom I've had this relationship through the Atlantic for the past 13 years, when Jeff Goldberg and I were in Dharamsala with His Holiness, and I asked him about his morning routine, and then I looked at it scientifically, and it's been very helpful for me to set that up. So exercise, for example, is an unhappiness side habit. On the happiness side of habits, there's 4 things that the happiest people do every day, and they are work with their faith or life philosophy. And again, you don't have to be religious. I'm Catholic, most important thing in my life. But as a scientist, I have to recognize that my way is not the only way when it comes to actually to life satisfaction. It's something that zooms you out on your ordinary life. Maybe it's studying the Stoics, or a Vipassana meditation practice, or walking before dawn in nature, or listening to Bach. Studying Bach is even better, or going back to the faith of your youth. Super important. Second practice is family life. Family life has almost magical properties on brain chemistry. And again, not everybody's got a great relationship with their family, but the one big mistake that people make is becoming estranged to their families because of something like politics. The only reason I have a schism with family is abuse, and differences of voting are not abuse. I have to mention this again and again at Harvard, where I teach. The third is friendship. Is really important. I mean, friendship. I mean, and we're talking, a lot of people watching us now are super. Okay, you back?
I can hear you.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
Yeah, who knows? Anyway, it's okay. Real friends, not. All right, we're having a little bit of trouble here. Hold on.
I can hear you. You just keep going, and I'll hopefully be here.
Okay. Sorry to everybody in the audience there. I mean, it's like this is, for some reason, we've got ghosts going through the network. And last but not least is work, is how you actually treat your work. And there's only 2 things to be focused on at work that are happiness practices. Number 1 is earning your success, being someplace where you're valued for your contribution and hard work and merit. And the second is serving other people, feeling needed is what it comes down to. So faith, family, friends, and work, and do those 4 things and watch your happiness rise.
And how do you, I know something that people talk about all the time is just this feeling of not having enough time for the things that matter most. How do you think about is it just a matter of prioritizing those 4 things, knowing that they're good for us and good for our families? Or how do you think about the sort of time crunch component of all of this?
So people are super busy. And one of the reasons that most people are busy, and I've actually looked at this in columns in my column in The Atlantic, which is why people are so busy. And the answer is not because they have too much to do. The reason is because people are terrified of idleness. The reason that they overcommit is because they're way, way, way worried about being underutilized as opposed to overutilizing the time. And so one of the things that people need to do is to actually set out a grid in their life and put in the things that are actually most important, and then be uncompromising about doing the things that are most important to them. And by the way, that's not all work. That includes leisure, but leisure is a serious business. It's not just chilling on the beach. It's, reading the books that you want to read that are really edifying to you. It's spending time with the people that you love. It's actually practicing your religion or your meditation. It's doing those serious things in life that really, really matter. So that's the time crunch problem. Now, what that will do, what is it going to crowd out? Scrolling social media is what it's going to crawl out. Looking at YouTube shorts is what that's going to crowd out. And that's what we want to do. We want to crowd out all the nonsense so we actually do the things that actually matter most to us. But that means building a grid mindfully and purposefully about the way that you want to use your time as a ways that your time is actually using you.
Yep. Okay, we're going to go to some subscriber questions. We have many. Thank you again to everyone who submitted them. Here's one. You have spoken about how you have to have pain to have joy. How does grief affect future happiness? This is something that everyone has to deal with at some point. Does it bring down the whole spectrum of joy, the possible joy? Does it make greater joy possible? What does the research say?
So grief lowers joy, and grief can also raise happiness. Now, it sounds like a contradiction in terms, but it isn't. Joy is a positive emotion. Happiness is not an emotion. Happiness is a phenomenon. It's a combination of three things, like the macronutrients. The protein, carbohydrates, and fat of happiness are enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. Those are the three things to do to get more happiness in your life. And that means to get those things, sometimes you need unhappiness. The greatest mistake that my students make is thinking that to become a happier person, you need to eliminate unhappiness. That's exactly wrong. If you spend your time and resources trying to eliminate your unhappiness, ironically, you will inadvertently eliminate your happiness. As sure as you and I are talking right here, that's the wrong approach. And so I make my students say, I mean, you don't need to. And by the way, my students ask, so professor, do I need to go looking for suffering? And I'm like, no, don't worry, it will find you. The question is, what do you do when your suffering finds you? And the answer is that you manage it, you learn from it, and you grow from it. In so doing, you'll get more satisfaction from your life. And most importantly, you'll get more depth of meaning in your life. Don't be afraid to suffer is the way. This is the number one lesson that we get from all Buddhist teachers, is always stop being afraid. Say life is suffering, live in a different way. Don't be afraid of suffering. What I'll do often with people I'm working with is to ask them to lean into their source of suffering in a big way, to imagine it, to go deeper into it, such that it's no longer a frightening thing. Most of the time when people are afraid of suffering, they're actually afraid of their feelings if something is a source of suffering. And to be afraid of your emotions is just insane. But of course we all are. And so that's one of the things we have to think about. Is grief, is it impossible to square with happiness? No, on the contrary. If you don't have sadness in your life, you never will have true happiness, is the whole point.
You talked about how trying to do away with unhappiness entirely actually will make you unhappy. I have a similar question about like the risks of optimizing for happiness. Like you're so clear, and the way you describe it is so actionable, which is tremendously helpful and brilliant. But I also wonder if people can get overly hooked on, sort of when you look at all the wellness, kind of the culture of wellness, like how do you think about incorporating optimization in a healthy, not overboard way, I guess?
Yeah, truly. And the biggest problem with that, and the biggest problem with kind of the bro science of happiness, if you will, is that it's all about having good feelings. And you should not optimize for good feelings, is what it comes down to. When you talk about, optimizing or solving for happiness, that's basically how to have a happy day and then turn that into every day is a happy day. And then it's a whole life of happy times and happy feelings. Well, if you eliminated negative feelings from your life, you wouldn't learn, you wouldn't grow, and you'd be dead in a week because you get run over by a car. The truth of the matter is that that's exactly the wrong approach. And that's why you have to understand what happiness is. It's not a feeling. It's this combination of enjoying your life as opposed to pursuing pleasure. Enjoyment is different. Enjoyment adds people and meaning for a truly human experience where you manage your pleasures and they're not managing you. So you're not subjugated in addiction. Where you have satisfaction. And satisfaction is all about deferring your gratification and using your suffering for a greater goal. And meaning is about feeling and understanding the fullness of life. And that requires tons of sadness and anger and grief and pain. And that's life, is what it comes down to. So optimizing good feelings, terrible idea. But trying to maximize your own happiness in the context of being fully alive and loving others and worshiping and creating value, that's great.
Talk a little bit about the state of happiness. This comes from one of our subscriber questions as well. Someone mentions that there's been, a decline in reported happiness in the US. I'll be curious how you'd characterize that. And this goes to sort of what you were just saying about how happiness does not mean unhappiness, but talk about sort of where we are as a society in the United States right now. How happy are we? What's going on with us?
It's not good. The answer is it's not good. And I'm sorry to report that happiness has been in gradual decline in the United States for the past 30 years. Since the early 1990s, as a matter of fact, since we've been, and we've been keeping good records of this since the early 1970s. So we've been able to see the trend. And it's kind of two things. There's sort of the climate for happiness, which is ticking down. And then there's these downdrafts, sort of these storms, the weather of happiness has also been a problem. So remember, faith, family, friends, and work are the four pillars of the happiest life. And all four of these have been in decline. But religious faith, but also a sense of life's philosophy, clearly in decline. Friendship, people have fewer friends and fewer people know me well. This is especially true in the era of social media. Family relationships have been increasingly attenuated. People are not getting married as much. People are not having as many kids, but also more and more people are estranged from their families. And then work, fewer people are saying that their work is a calling than ever since we've been keeping records on this. And lots of people disagree about why that's the case, but it is the case. And so tick, 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 tick. And then there's the storms, three big storms, downdrafts and happiness. Number one is, what happened in 2008, 2009, which I used to think was the financial crisis. No, that was when everybody got a personal screen and got social media apps on their screens. Catastrophic for happiness, catastrophic. Second is the polarization in politics, which has been systematically ripping friendships and families apart. We have been utterly productized by the political system and the media industrial complex that wants us to hate people for clicks and votes and dollars and attention. When you hate, everybody listening to it, when you hate, you've become the product. When you hate for political leaders, you become the product. And then last, and then the last is what happened during the coronavirus epidemic, where everything went online and a lot of people never came back. It was a huge problem. So you found that depression symptoms went up by about fourfold and have not fallen anywhere close to where they were before the coronavirus epidemic, because a lot of people, they didn't go back to work, they didn't go back to school. I talk to people every day who say that they kind of never went back to life since that. And that the catastrophic reaction that we had to the coronavirus epidemic was terrible for happiness.
You have such concrete, good advice for what we can do at an individual level for happiness. But given what you've just described, what do we do at a societal level? Like, how do we, do we just have to unplug the internet or throw our smartphones in the ocean, or like what can be done collectively? Yeah.
So there's a lot of people are sort of polarized and have extreme ideas about what it should be. Like, let's everybody get off tech. Well, that's not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. Other people are sort of utopian about it. When we get enough tech with enough AI, we're going to solve this problem. That's also completely wrong. I have a book coming out next April called The Meaning of Your Life, Finding Purpose in an Age of Emptiness. And it talks about the fact that we've literally changed the way our brains work because of the overuse and the misuse of technology that makes meaning harder and harder to understand, to process in the right hemisphere of the cerebral cortex. And so that's not the answer either. The answer is that we actually have to, that younger generations in particular, have to learn responsible use of the technology. And they will, because people won't stay miserable forever. A couple of things are happening right now. You're going to find that younger people are going to and are already starting to learn how to use social media so it makes them less nuts. You're going to see a big resurgence in religious activity, I think, and we're already starting to see the beginning of that. So people are going to go back to the things that mattered and start to leaving behind the use of things that are not as good for us. And that's traditionally the way that technology has evolved into how it's used by humans. I'm incredibly hopeful, Adrienne. I think we're actually at the beginning of a good time for increases in happiness and love for each other, but it's been painful along the way.
Let's go back to some subscriber questions. We have a question from someone who says, I experience a lot of anxiety at work. What are some successful ways you or others have written about to reduce unhealthy levels of stress and anxiety?
Yeah, stress and anxiety at work is one particular type of anxiety, of course. And I've talked an awful lot about how to feel better about work, but let me talk more generally about anxiety, and let me define anxiety. People use fear, anxiety, and stress interchangeably. They're not the same thing. Fear is what we're evolved to feel. That's the activity that's involved in the limbic system of the brain, the thing called the amygdala, that bilateral little almond-shaped structure in the inside of your head. And what happens is when you perceive a threat, that stimulates the amygdala to give you fight or flight. It signals through the hypothalamus of the brain to the pituitary gland, and then it stimulates the adrenal glands above your kidneys to spit out stress hormones. And that's when you take off running before you know what's going on. That's why you jump out of the way of an oncoming car before you even realize that has happened. Your amygdala has saved your life again and again and again. Now, the stress response, which is physiological to the fear, that's stress. So stress is a physiological response. Between the two is anxiety, which is unfocused, chronic, low-grade fear. Okay, so what happens is if you have a threat, if you perceive a threat, that's not a mortal threat, that's ongoing, that's kind of scratching your amygdala and giving you a drip of these stress hormones all day long, and you're not really focusing on the source of it. You're just apprehensive and feeling very, very tense and feeling mildly fearful. And a lot of you right now out there, I can't see you, but you're nodding your heads. Yeah, that's how I feel a lot at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It is physiological, but also it has to do with the fact that we have a maladapted fear response in modern life because we're treating, I don't know, social media as if it were a leopard on the savannah. It's not the same thing is the whole point. And so that's what we need to deal with. So what I do with anxiety, I mean, you go to the doctor will often say, well, take this benzodiazepine drug and it will lower your symptoms of anxiety by lowering stress, by lowering this physiological response. Here's a better way to deal with it as a first line of defense. Turn it back into fear. Turn it into what it's supposed to be. When something is making you very stressed out, when you're very anxious about something, don't let it hang over you like a phantasm. On the contrary, write down, take out your pencil, because what that does is it moves the experience from your limbic system into your prefrontal cortex where you have executive authority, and write it down and say, what is the actual fear that is unfocused and chronic here? Once you write it down, it suddenly becomes less fearful because you're worried about something that's almost certainly not going to come to pass. I've written 2 or 3 columns in the Atlantic and How to Build a Life about this. So go back through the archive and look at the columns I've written about worrying and about anxiety. But the bottom line is, once you say, why am I afraid? Make it explicit. Talk about the likelihood of this great fear coming to pass and being catastrophic and what I would do in that case. And I promise you that if you go through your list of worries and anxieties this way, you will sleep better and you will feel better. This is the number one line of defense against anxiety.
That's great. Another question from a reader. And this goes to the point you were making earlier about people turning away from those who disagree with them politically. This person asks, what advice do you have on communication for couples on opposite sides of the political spectrum?
Yeah, I see this a lot. And of course, it's a beautiful thing that we live in a country where that can be the case. And there shouldn't be any reason that actually leads to a loss of love. What that means is that you see different things. Usually it means that you don't even have a great difference of values. You just have different ways of serving those particular values. When you have anybody in your life that you love, whether it's a couple or a family member or whatever it is, learn to listen more to learn as opposed to winning arguments. By the way, this is Adrienne, you've been married a long time. I've been married 34 years. The secret to staying married is not winning, it's learning, it's listening. It's not winning. And because if you're winning in your marriage, you're halfway to losing is basically what it comes down to. So it's when your spouse has a weird opinion about something, the first reaction should be, I never thought about that. What are you talking about? I need to know more, out of genuine curiosity, because the person you love the most in the world has just said something odd. That should get your attention and make you want to learn a lot more. Then the second thing is, even though you disagree, learn how to defend your spouse. Learn how to defend your spouse's point of view. And what you'll find is you're weirdly kind of meeting in the middle, because you're listening more and defending each other more. And even though you don't change your view, you're going to find that your spouse is starting to make a little bit more sense. And these are very common techniques for any sort of spousal conflict, but this works for politics.
We have another reader question. This one is about starting over. This reader writes in, they're a divorced 55-year-old man and asking, how do you redefine what happiness looks like? I have always defined myself as a father and husband, and while I'll always be a father, my kids aren't at home and are at the age they don't need me anymore. I find myself middle-aged in an unfulfilling job and alone. how can we help this man?
Yeah, no, and the truth is you're still a father and you were a husband for a long time, and your jobs change. Your job as a father changes and your job as a spouse has changed. Unfortunately, your job as a spouse presumably didn't change the way that you wanted it to change. But what that means, like anything else, is that when you have something that you perceive as a grievous loss, what it is, it's a real threat, as you suggest, to your identity. I get that. I mean, your identity is changed. It's like I defined myself as a husband and father. I get that. But the truth is that you're a person. You're a full human being is the whole point. And your job specifications have actually changed as a full human being. Looking for new ways to actually manifest your creativity and your hard work and your personal responsibility. That's the thing to actually start looking for. Since my job has changed, what has actually opened up for me? What has opened up for me in my life that I can actually do? And the key thing in those openings in your life is to ask, how can I serve more? Look, you served as a husband. It's all water under the bridge now that the marriage hasn't succeeded, or at least it didn't succeed anymore. You succeeded obviously as a father because you have I'm sure you still have a relationship with your kids. But what happened is that you got time in your schedule to now serve more in new ways. Here's the question to ask. How can I serve more with this time that I have available? Who needs me? Somebody, I promise you, brother, somebody needs you. It might not be the people needing you as much as needed you in the past, but somebody else needs you right now. Put your thinking cap on about that and ask your friends. And what you're going to find is that your life is going to seem a lot better and your family is going to admire you a lot more. And nobody's going to feel sorry for you for a single second when they see you turn into the person you're supposed to be, which is fully helping at this new stage of your life in some part of life.
Let's talk a bit more about parenthood. I mean, all parents, I think, are preoccupied with raising happy children. They want nothing but happiness for their children. These are all very familiar ideas to parents. And yet there's so relatively little you can control about, how happy your children are at any given moment or in general. What advice do you have for parents who wish for nothing more than happy children?
Yeah, that's the wrong aspiration. I mean, it's a normal aspiration, but it's the wrong aspiration. And part of the reason for that is that that's not something that you can provide. And the more that you try to provide that, the more you cut off the learning opportunities for your children. Now, to begin with, remember, happiness is not a feeling. You should never worry at all about your kids' feelings. Stop worrying about your kids' feelings. If you do that, you'll become an over-empathetic parent, which will make you not compassionate enough, making you unable to do the hard things. I've written a lot about the differences between empathy and compassion. The worst parents of teenagers are over-empathetic and insufficiently compassionate as a result. If you're worried about your kids' feelings, you're actually worried about your own feelings. Second is when it comes to the happiness itself, which truly is this combination of enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning, which is a rich psychological and neurophysiological experience, they need everything to happen to them. John Haidt has written again and again in our magazine about the fact that we've overparented our kids into misery. Why are they so addicted to smartphones and everybody going to therapy right now? It's because we didn't let them fail. We didn't let them have conflict. It's like they have this huge social peanut allergy is the reason that they're on campuses saying, doing cancel culture and saying, get all these controversial speakers out of here. I mean, that's the problem today is that our kids aren't hardy because we've been so worried about protecting them from negative experiences. Don't do that to your kids. Give them the experiences they need. And again, I say this with appropriate humility. I'm not a perfect parent. And I tried and it didn't work is the whole point until I finally kind of let go a little bit. I let go as a religious person. I remember, we're having trouble with my adolescent son, Carlos, and he was in, the school's calling every day. I think he failed math. I think he got a D in history. He didn't show up for his exams. And finally, Esther, my wife's like, at least we know he's not cheating. I mean, it was the worst, right? And finally, she had this prayer, and not everybody's religious here, but you'll appreciate the prayer nonetheless. She said, you met Esther, Adrienne. And she's like, I heard her praying and says, Lord, you have a problem with Carlos. How can I help?
I love that.
Because she felt that, it's not her child. But the whole point is what we did was we tried to boil down, number one, what we really wanted, which is we told him, look, I don't care what grades you get, because we actually don't. I want you to be honest. I want you to be compassionate, and I want you to be faithful. That's what we want for you. And then we want you to live a full life. And so when our son got ready to go to college, he didn't go to college. He went and worked on a farm, and then he joined the Marine Corps, and he became a Marine sniper. And that was super scary, and it was super hard. The hardest thing he ever did. It was a super dangerous job, but he came out a man. He came out an adult. He came out the person he was supposed to be. And now today, by the way, Adrienne, this is a real hard day for me because my daughter, my baby, started her Marine Corps service today as a second lieutenant. And she just left today for Monaco, but it's the same thing. It's like, thanks, I know, but it's like when your kid's in the military, but that's the point. My kids are fully alive, and I finally figured that out.
Tease out this. You talked a little bit about the distinction between compassion and empathy. Tease that out for me a little bit more. What is the difference, and how should people think about that?
I know it's hard because everybody uses them. They use these two terms synonymously, but they're not the same. Empathy is to feel somebody else's pain, and there's nothing evil about that or naive or stupid about that at all. The problem is it's an incomplete virtue. Compassion contains empathy, but adds in three other qualities. Number one is understanding the source of somebody's pain, feeling enough of it to actually being able to act, figuring out what needs to be done, and then acting on it, notwithstanding your feelings. Those are the four parts of compassion. Frequently, when you truly love somebody, to be compassionate, you have to do things that they don't like. You have to say, I'm sorry, your job here isn't right for you. It's not right for us, and it's not right for you. Or to your children, no, you can't do that. I'm taking away your smartphone. I know you don't like it. I know you don't like it. But empathy tends to, when all you have is empathy, it tends to paralyze you. And when you have compassion, you're able to be the person that you are supposed to be. And that's what we're all called to be in all walks of leadership in our life, whether parent or manager or anything else. I mean, I can only imagine your job every day, Adrienne. You're called to be compassionate every day because you have a lot of employees and you love them. But to be overly empathetic wouldn't be good for you or for them, let alone the magazine.
Hearing you talk about all of these things, one theme that comes up for me is the need to be disciplined, either for yourself, for the people you love. Is that the right word? Do you think about, like, in terms of habit building, even, like, is it about, at its core, is it about having the discipline to choose the life that you know you should lead, or that you wish to lead, or the one that where you find meaning? Like, how much of this is about discipline?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and I have a column coming out in the Atlantic about Baruch Spinoza, the Portuguese Jewish philosopher living in Amsterdam, he was actually excommunicated by both the Jewish community, and he was completely rejected by the Christian community because he had very strange views. He did not believe in a personal God. He thought that God was nature, and he was rejected by the civic authorities. And he was a very, very happy person because he understood the nature of self-managing his own emotions. He used his own philosophy on himself. And what he understood was incredibly adroit neuroscience. Your limbic system gives you emotions for a reason, which is to give you signals about the outside world. Whether the outside world is full of opportunities or threats, that's what your emotions are for, is to alert you to opportunities and threats. That's it. There's no such thing as good and bad feelings. Bad feelings are negative emotions and they keep you alive. Good feelings are positive emotions, saying there's, berries on a bush for you to eat or a potential mate. That's all it is what it comes down to. I don't mean to belittle it because, poets and country and Western songs have been writing about feelings this entire time. But we must not be managed by our feelings. We must be able to understand and manage our emotions such that we can use them appropriately to be full human persons. So when I'm talking about discipline, what I'm talking about is emotional self-management. And some days I'm better than that than others, I have to say. But the better that we get at it, the more we enjoy our lives, the more satisfying our experiences, and the more meaning that we actually see. Because really what it comes down to is that human life is this combination of sort of animal and divine. And I use divine with a little d in case people are not religious about that. But that's the difference between our animal inclinations and our moral aspirations. Only humans have a difference between those two things. And to the extent that we're living according to our moral aspirations as opposed to our just natural animal impulses, that's when life is the sweetest. And that's what we need to aspire to.
Do you have like a mantra or a set of tactics, or if you start to feel like your feelings are managing you rather than you managing them, where do you go mentally, or what do you do to reset?
Yeah, so it's interesting because as somebody I'm a traditionally religious person, and so my mantra is a traditionally religious mantra, and it comes from a very famous Russian book from the 19th century written by an anonymous monk called The Way of a Pilgrim. And pilgrimage is very important to me. I said at the outset of this conversation that I walked the Camino de Santiago. I've actually done it twice. That's a pilgrimage. And I recommend that everybody do a pilgrimage, secular or religious, where you walk thinking about issues that you want to resolve in your life and questions that you want to find answers to. Walking is the most human and healthiest of all human activities. Is we're built to walk is the whole point. And you walk yourself into an understanding. And so this book, this monk is just walking around Eastern Russia in the end of the 19th century, is walking around, saying one single prayer, which in Christianity is called the Jesus prayer. And all it is this: Lord Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And just says it again and again and again and again and again. And what he does is he talks himself into an understanding of the essence of human life. So the point that I'm trying to make is, and this is a neurophysiological point as much as anything else, to the extent that there is something that's completely consistent with your values and that opens up your heart and mind to the humility of finding out something you didn't know about yourself, you learn to say that, and that becomes your mantra, whatever it happens to be. Now, there are a lot of ways that you can actually do that. That's what transcendental meditation more or less is doing. And there are a lot of different techniques for it, but find your own and make that the thing you go to sleep saying at night. Make that the thing that you do when you're in your morning walk, and you're going to actually find your life changing a lot. Anyway, long answer. That's mine.
No, I love that. I also love yes, a pilgrimage is great, but also just go for a walk. Sometimes that can make a world of difference. There was a documentary I watched once where an urban designer sort of said in passing something to the effect of oh, we're all just small walking mammals. And that's always just stuck with me. It's just oh yeah, we are. We're just small walking mammals. Okay, last question, because we're running out of time. I would love to talk all day with you. Talk to me a little bit about your own happiness. And I'd love to hear in particular, what, over the course of this time you've spent really researching and getting to know, what happiness is for people, what it means, what's happening to us societally, what has changed most for you personally? How do you talked about being 55 and unhappy and turning it around, thank goodness, but what have you learned? What is the number one thing that you hold close as you think about your own happiness, and what can we learn from you?
Well, I have goals on this, and I'm hoping to make progress over the course of my life. So we talked before about the three pillars of happiness, the three macronutrients of happiness. Everybody watching us right now has a score for each one of those macronutrients. So everybody think right now, okay, where 10 is the person at the highest I've ever met and 1 is the lowest. What is your number on enjoyment? What is your number on your enjoyment of life? What is your number on the satisfaction that you take with your accomplishments? And what is the number on the why of your existence? What the presence of meaning is in your life? And then assess it, and then think where you need to make progress. This is what I'm doing all the time. Now, I break it down into micronutrients across 19 dimensions, and I keep it on a spreadsheet that I'm updating very seriously on my birthday and my half birthday, but monthly I'm actually going through it to set goals. But here's the bottom line, because I'm not going to obviously share the spreadsheet here right now, although probably that might be interesting to some people, weirdos like me. But number one, when I think about it, my satisfaction in accomplishments and what I'm doing professionally, it's 9. It's super high. I don't need to work on that. When it comes to meaning in my life, meaning is, I think, about a 6.5. Meaning I could use a little bit more work on that. And so my next book is The Meaning of Your Life. And I want to understand that. But also there's a huge meaning crisis for people under 35. That's what explains the mental health epidemic in America today, is this problem with finding life's meaning. But me too, a little bit. The big challenge that I have, Adrienne, is enjoyment. I'm a 3 on enjoyment. I need to learn to enjoy my life more. I do. I recognize that. I mean, my wife, who enjoys life, she's Spanish and she enjoys life like crazy, man. And so the love of my life is at a 9 in enjoyment. I know that I'm a 3 or a 4. I just know that to be the case. And so my goal over the next 3 years, my project is learning actually how to enjoy my life more. And I'm going to make progress. And maybe in 3 years, we'll check back in.
We'll definitely check back in. I recommend going for walks and going to see live music. That's my tactics for you. Thank you so much, Arthur. It's so wonderful to have you. Just to remind everyone, Arthur's new book, The Happiness Files, Insights on Work and Life, is out tomorrow. Please buy it and read him in The Atlantic and listen to his podcast, Office Hours. Arthur, thank you so much. As always, it's such a pleasure to speak with you. And thank you to everyone for being with us.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for subscribing. Bye.